Hi, this is Joe Speaks Truth. Just 3 years ago, New York City was placed under the harshest lockdowns out of the whole country. Well, things seem that they're going back to normal. I want to invite you all to listen to the untold stories of the many New Yorkers that had to survive lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Hello everyone, this is Joe Speaks Truth, and today I have a special guest and a good friend of mine, known to the world as Curtis Orwell, who's one of the OGs from the medical freedom movement. Curtis was working in real estate when he initially got involved into activism. Welcome, Curtis. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for being here, because this is extremely important to me, because everything seems like it's over now, but is it really? So we're going to dive deep in, and I'm going to ask you some questions that I feel like we need to have a conversation, because nothing is over yet, right? So you and I met in 2020 in Union Square when Kara and Eric had an anti-lockdown protest. And initially, we just bonded. It's almost like as if we were meant to meet each other. Typically when I meet people for the first time, I'm a little hesitant just because I feel like I don't know you well, but you and I, it was just immediately, right? And so I want you to go back and talk about that moment that landed you in that protest. How were you able to find the flyer for that? Because me, I knew Kara, so how were you able to get yourself involved?
Yeah, well, at the time I was living downtown. I was living in New York City, and I would pass by Union Square, and I was at the time looking for something that I could express my anger to what was happening. At that point, that was in November of 2020, but by June, July, August, I was already getting the itch to display my anger, and I initially started it with the plight to fight human trafficking, which is something I learned about in the summer of 2020. All of us were on lockdown, and I learned that we have an enormous human trafficking issue in our country and on our globe. I should preface, I'm not Q, for the people that want to know, the inquiring minds, not that it matters. I respect people who respect Q as well, I suppose, but I'm not. But, you know, one of the things they were speaking about was human trafficking, and there were some rallies that were popping up in June, July of 20, and you know, there was something to do. It was something to do. I mean, my business was basically closed up at that point, and I was angry because in the beginning of the pandemic, or shall I say the plandemic, many of us I locked myself down, and we'll dive deeper in that. I locked myself down into the plandemic, and so I was in my home for 10 weeks. So by that point, around mid-May, early June, I was ready to be out and about and also do something constructive with my time. So I found a few of those rallies that I actually even helped to organize. And that movement kind of, I wouldn't say died down, but it kind of dissipated. And then before I knew it, I don't know what the exact, I found people at Union Square, and there was something coming up on Sunday, and I figured I had 15 blocks to walk. I had no excuse. So I figured I might as well go down, meet like-minded people, and also protest what was so evidently clear, that this was a governmental tyranny. This was tyranny, straight up tyranny that was unprecedented, and I was angry, and I wanted to share my sentiments with the world and New York City.
Rightfully so. I mean, I was very angry as well at that time. But let's go back. How was your life before 2020, before they announced that there was a global pandemic? What were you doing?
Right. So I was living on the Upper West Side. I was a residential sales agent with a major firm, and did very well, was a very successful real estate agent in New York City, and just living my life and going to synagogue and hanging out with friends and just doing what you do when you live in this city. I always had conservative leanings, but, you know, I lived in the city, and I pretty much, you know, you just kind of go with the flow. I just kind of living my life. The pandemic hit, or shall I say the plandemic, and I realized that something was up. Something was off. And so before, just kind of living my life, just kind of just doing my real estate thing and just living life.
Okay, So the same thing for me. So prior to 2020, I was working. I was making plans. I had my goals set out for me, like the things that I wanted to accomplish, in the near future and things like that. And so everything just came in and just caught everyone by surprise. But so what was your reaction when you saw on the news that there was a global pandemic and that we needed to shut down the world for 2 weeks to slow down the spread?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, at the time I was living on the Upper West Side, and initially I was skeptical, to be honest with you. But my friend who lives in Israel, my friend Alan, he said, we've got to pay attention, because everyone was paying attention to what was happening in Italy at the time and abroad. And it seemed to me that things were getting serious. At the time, I had a television set. It was a 45-inch screen, which, I had a blank wall. I figured, why not fill it up with a TV? I hadn't had a TV in over 10 years, but I was shopping one day, and I figured, let me buy a TV. They're so cheap now. And I would keep my TV on, and to be honest with you, Joe, I fell for it. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I was, as we always joke, I was a member of the cult. It was a rough time. I mean, what should I say? I mean, I was very strict. I mean, I didn't hang out with anyone. I mean, literally since mid-February till around mid-May, early June, I'm embarrassed to say. I mean, I guess it's all part of the learning curve, right? And hindsight is 20/20. But I mean, I had some people that were really concerned about me. I was basically isolated from the world. I was hanging out on my fire escape, clapping for the medical workers, and we have videos of that as well. And yeah, no, I fell for it hook, line, sinker. I was trying to socially distance. I had the mask on. I mean, I was into it. And I mean, I'm just so grateful that I fell out of it. But I was into it. I didn't hang out with any of my peeps. I had a Passover Seder alone on Zoom, which was terrible. I vowed never to do that ever again. And I was really into it. And what really opened me up, what really changed the paradigm for me, was when the BLM riots broke out in the city. Mm-hmm. And that was huge. That was really a paradigm shift for me, because I thought to myself, wow, there should be an uptick of death now, because people are congregating, people are getting together, and the politicians that we had, Governor Cuomo at the time, and Mayor Bill de Blasio, I don't want to mention his name in this space, they were not only were they discouraging the behavior of getting together, but they were actually encouraging the behavior. And I thought to myself, wait, that doesn't make sense. There is a deadly virus out there. People are dying by the droves. In fact, I remember watching TV. There was a death ticker on the bottom right-hand corner. I was staying home to save lives, right? And I thought to myself, something is not adding up. Something is not adding up. This does not make sense. And, it didn't make sense to me that in a country where a black man was elected twice as president, how there could be racism with the police. It didn't equate to me, where popular culture was it's so overtly, proudly black and African American. It didn't make sense to me that there were these killings happening now, and there was this conspiracy of the police, and that really woke me up. And the riots, that really woke me up on a visceral level. It's quite another when you hear about something, then it's quite another when you're actually hearing the riots break out in your own neighborhood, right? And you're actually hearing the looting, and you're actually hearing the noise outside. It got scary, it got gnarly, and it really shook me on a real visceral level. And I thought to myself, wait, so if they're lying to me about this, what else are they lying to me about? Mm-hmm.
So you went ahead of the curve. I'm glad you gave an explanation on how you got out of that, because I think because the government is so smart, they have studied like human behavior and psychology, that they know exactly what to do, what to say in order to induce the masses to behave or move in a certain way. And I'm glad that you were one of those few people that was able to wake up, because I do remember the riots, right? And I spoke out from the very beginning, because I am so thankful and grateful that I was able to see right away through the manipulation. And I have read books years ago that told me that in the near future, the government was going to do something like this. I just didn't think that I was going to live to see. I guess I forgot about it.
Right.
But the riots was one of the things that happened during that time that got me so angry, because I'm like, wait a minute. So I'm being told I needed to stay home. I could not go to work. I could not get on a plane. I couldn't go to church. But the government is encouraging riots, right? But there's no 6 feet. Some people are wearing masks. Some people are not wearing masks. Where's the virus there, and why is no one questioning that? I honestly thought that if it wasn't anything else, that it would be the riots that happened in 2020 of George Floyd that was going to wake up the whole country.
Yeah.
And that people were going to be so mad that they were actually going to do something. But instead, when I took it to social media and I said, wait a minute, like, okay, well, if we can have riots, can I go on the cruise? Oh, no, Joe, but that's not the same thing. How dare you say that? Or whatever the case might be. But it's baffling to me how people saw that happen and nothing clicked and,
Yeah.
Yeah. And made them like, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful to that period of time, because that was part of my awakening. Like you talked about the businesses that were opened and closed, exactly. The churches and the synagogues were closed for business, yet liquor stores were open, porn shops were open. These were considered essential services. And then, I got introduced to Yuri Bezmenov, Ideological Subversion, who I like to quote a lot. The 4 stages of the ideological subversion. And the first step is the demoralization. We must be demoralized as a society. I mean, we could talk about this further, and this has been decades in the making, but it seems to me that in 2020, everything came up to a crescendo. Everything kind of came to a screeching halt with all the tactics that they designed for us. So it was very much an ideological subversion.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, for sure. But I also have here on my notes that, and I'm glad that you used the word cult, because what happened in 2020, it is the making of a cult. That is exactly how you do it, right? Because the techniques are the same, even if how can I explain it? The techniques that are used in a cult is the same throughout every cult. It could be a religious cult, it could be a gang. It's the same psychological tactics that are implemented in order to get people to join. And so I said here, I seen pictures of you that suggest you were dipping into the COVID cult. You had stay at home signs, banners on your Facebook
stay home, save lives
account.
Yeah.
You were also on the fire escape.
Yeah, I'm right on the fire escape. Yeah, that was my portal to the outside world.
Right. And then you told me this story that when I first heard it, I think I laughed about, hours at a time.
Yeah, you're being extremely professional right now.
I am. This is taking a lot for me to just keep my laughter in, because I think at that day, I laughed so hard. You told me that you were so scared that when you were going outside to throw out your garbage, that you would tilt your head up and just like try to getting as much sun as you could at that time, because that was the only time that you were having any direct contact with the outside world.
Yeah, well, particularly vitamin D.
What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I was just so grateful to the good Lord that He was providing me the essential nutrients of vitamin D, right? I was just so grateful in those few seconds while I was taking out my trash. But I remember being little, and I have videos all around Facebook. I literally would bring my phone out and I would record it, I would document it. And perhaps down the road I'll compile something. But yeah, what was going through my mind was that I'm just so grateful for vitamin D. I'm grateful for the outside elements. It was scary to be out there, because it could be a run-in with another human being. But yeah, I mean, my brain was twisted. I mean, I own it. I recognize it.
Right. Do you feel any shame, when you sit back and think of, did I really do this?
That's a good question. I don't know.
And let me ask, do you think that you going back to the times that you were yourself brainwashed, does that help you to have more compassion towards the people that are still brainwashed in a way?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, certainly you would think that would help me acquire some more empathy. I don't know if I feel more empathy. I should feel empathy for these people who have not yet woken up. I don't know if I feel so much empathy for the people who have not yet woken up. But I guess everyone has got their journey, and everyone's at their certain place in their journey. I feel like what we're seeing now in these last 3 years, especially now with these, we're now in February of 2023. In the last couple weeks, we've seen 3 train derailments in the course of a week, which is unheard of. It's unprecedented. I mean, if you haven't woken up at this point, then I really don't have any empathy for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have empathy because at this point, you would think that I would acquire some empathy, but no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about
Maybe something I
that,
need to work on.
do you receive any backlash from families and friends the minute you decided to be public about your feelings and how you are no longer part of the COVID cult?
Yeah, my family lives abroad. They don't live here in the United States, so I don't think they had a clear idea. Thankfully, they're not vaccinated. I made sure to, because I was around a lot of like-minded people, and I'm into focusing on my health. I'm into eating properly. I'm into taking my vitamins. I'm into taking, doing my yoga. I got yoga certified in summer of 2019. I do my kung fu. I try to exercise. I don't always get it right. I pray. I meditate. I try to take care of myself. I understand that it's my responsibility, my health. But did I receive any backlash? I mean, in terms of professionally, I received some backlash.
I want to discuss that later. Yeah.
Okay. But in terms of personal, yeah, I would say so a little bit. I think in social media, I think people maybe thought I had lost my marbles a bit, that I was sort of off the hinges. I got some interesting messages. People were calling me Q. It seems to me...
And Q, you're talking about QAnon.
QAnon, correct. And so I was getting that kind of accusatory type comments. At this point, not really. I think at this point, not that I'm looking for it, but I think that my sphere of influence have come to a point, whether they've admitted it or not, I think there is some respect for me ultimately, because I was always very blatant about my ideology and my ideas, and saying that this was in fact an ideological subversion. I kept on, between Instagram and between Facebook. On Instagram, I have over 2,500 posts on my Curtis Orwell IG page. Of course, that page was heavily censored and heavily shadow banned, which of course led me to design my 2 other pages, Freedom Fighters of NYC, and of course, Question Everything TV _.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact you emphasize underscore because I started the underscore trend.
You sure did, yeah. Great minds think alike.
I agree. Okay, so now this is where I really want you to explain to people.
Yeah.
Right? Because unlike myself and everyone else that was fired because, lockdowns, I guess because the business couldn't stay open anymore because they lost revenue during the lockdowns. And unlike other people that were fired, I guess because of the mask mandates, not wanting to get tested, there were certain situations in which people were let go at that time. And then I was let go because I chose to not abide by the vaccine mandates. In your case, you had a watershed moment in which you were by a school and you were advocating, you had a megaphone, and you were telling the children to remove the mask. That video went viral, and there were multiple articles that were reading about you, right? Published by Rolling Stone, Daily Mail, The Insider, and other publications, right? And as a result, you were fired from your job.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I don't think I've ever publicly spoken about it. I spoke about it once in a speech in Times Square. But it was in October of 21. I was coming back from a freedom rally, a medical freedom rally on the Upper East Side. I was walking with my friend Evan at the time. We went to go grab a bite to eat, and we were coming back to the place to meet up with friends. And it was around mid-afternoon, around 3:30. The kids were getting out of school, middle-aged kids, like 10, 11, 12. And for me, and we've talked about this, and you've talked about this ad nauseum, is that you talked about the lack of empathy that this mask creates. We need to be able to see facial expressions. Without it, we become apathetic, right? So lack of empathy leads to apathy. And so for me, my Achilles heel are when children are masked. We've seen that there's no contagion with the children, right? But yet it seems that in our city and other places, children were masked. And this to me is horrendous. I mean, this to me is creating a whole generation, a whole legacy of apathetic humans, which is really a scary place to be. So I was feeling riled up. I just got back from lunch. I was headed back to meet up with friends, as I said, on the Upper East Side, and a school was getting out. I had my bullhorn with me. The parents were picking up the kids from school, and I said, and you could see this on the video that went viral, "Dear parents, please remove these masks from your children. This is an ideological subversion. This is horrible. You need to have empathy. Children need empathy." I got some flack from the parents. They thought I was crazy. I said, "You can't let go of CNN." This was about a 45-second clip. And of course, a lot of what I did, yourself included, and a lot of us in the freedom movement, we were very public in our social media lives.
Yes.
Right? And so I threw this video online, and it got in the wrong hands, and it got wind. My brokers found out about this video. My broker called me up. She said, "Did you post a video with you yelling at children?" I said, "I didn't yell at children. I yelled at parents." And I had the most sincere message to parents, and to my idea, especially when it comes to advocacy and it comes to education, is that if I can inspire just one human being, it will have been worth it. If I can save one child, it will have been worth it. And long story short, my broker called me. They were getting a lot of, they had tagged my real estate firm saying, "Would you work with Curtis? He's chasing children." They totally twisted the story. Well, within an hour of getting that call from my broker, my email was disabled. I was fired. Which was pretty shocking considering that my broker is pro-medical freedom. They themselves disclosed to me that they weren't jabbed. They're also the products of Holocaust survivors. And so totally in agreement, totally in alignment. But unfortunately, what I've learned in the last few years when it comes to people's money source, people get crazy and they get very fearful, and they start making irrational decisions. So unfortunately, I was let go because of the pressure that mounted up. And there was a campaign, basically. It was a smear campaign against me. And ultimately, that story ended up, as you said, in a few different places, most notably UK Daily Mail. Thankfully, they did a very nice spread. They got really good pictures from Facebook. They went on my Facebook profile. But it's a 5-minute read, so they obviously spent some time. They were targeting myself, you, others in the freedom movement, and this was just perfect fodder for them to run with it. So that was a little bit. That was a learning curve. That was really, at the time, I mean, I've made my peace with it, but it was traumatic. It was, I was shocked, and considering that I thought I had an ally in my broker, but apparently not, and it's just part of the story, I guess.
It's so interesting to me how basically speaking the truth became a crime. Mm-hmm. But it's just like I've looked back in history, and the reason why genocides continue to happen, the reason why we have war and things like that, is because good men see evil things, mm-hmm. and they do nothing about it, right? And when it comes to integrity, I realize that a lot of the issues that we have in this world, it comes from the fact that people lack integrity. I think, for me, speaking for myself, I don't care if I had to lose everything that I have, mm-hmm. right? When it comes to a topic of human rights violation, when it comes to standing up for what is truthful, I'd rather lose everything. Yeah. Because I will be able to go to sleep at night and say, you know what? I did the right thing. Maybe it might have caused me some issues, but I'd rather that than to be living a lie.
Exactly. I mean, I realize that this is the hill that you have to be willing to die on.
I agree for sure. And talking about that, you were also arrested 2 times.
That's right.
Can you let us know why that happened?
Sure. Well, the first time I was arrested was in March of 21. It was with you and Kevin and a bunch of others, and it seemed like I was one of the first to get arrested in this very prickly time, and eventually that became a theme. People were getting arrested left and right, but as you know, or as our viewers may know, or may not know is that one of my themes was to burn the masks.
May I ask, why were you burning masks?
Yeah,
what did that represent?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I remember at the time I thought I wanted to do something that was going to end this madness, and I knew that I had to move the needle somehow, some way, and I had to do something that was visceral. And it occurred to me, you know, during the fake feminist movement, of course, by, you know, the CIA operative Gloria Steinem, you know, a lot of that movement, you know, you had women burning their bras. And I thought to myself, well, you know, maybe we could take masks, which symbolizes a slavery, because we know that it is a slavery. The fact that we're oppressing our own oxygen levels, the fact that we're oppressing our whole selves as humans, right? If we burn them, that could be something very visceral. Now, a lot of people loved it. People loved the mass burnings. I did them in a lot of the rallies. I believe in November 2020, when we met, we did a burning mask ceremony, which was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And people either really loved it or they really got triggered. So one fine day in March of 21 seemed to be a really gnarly year. In 21, we were in Albany, upstate New York, and, you know, I brought my mask with me. You know, I had my 200 mask, I brought my lighter fluid, I brought my lighter. At this point, I'd become a professional pyromaniac, and I burned some mask, and this was on the steps of the Capitol of the New York State building. I don't want to say the Capitol. I wasn't there January 6th. We can talk about what we were actually doing on January 6th. We had the real insurrection. We can talk about that in a little bit. But basically, I was burning masks on the steps of the building of the New York State Court. I think it was the New York State Courthouse, or was it what was it? What was that building? Do you remember?
I don't even remember. It's
okay, so it was in Albany. Long story short, I had some cops who came out, some local policemen, and they didn't really take to it all that much, and I was arrested. And there's a video of it too, if you're so inclined to show your viewers, because of course we throw everything on video, because nothing is a secret any longer. And yeah, that was my first time being arrested. Now, my second arrest was because I was ripping down propaganda throughout the city. As one may recall, there were many signs that were showing people how to wear their slave contraption, aka mask. And I really didn't appreciate those pieces of propaganda, and I would rip them down. The only problem is, Joe, is that I would put it again on social media. Right. So a few of us, were arrested for the crime of pulling down propaganda.
And for the people that might be watching this and are not from New York City, they had posters everywhere, by the bus stop, on the trains, that said if you put on a mask properly, meaning cover your nose, cover your mouth and your chin, that it meant that you were a good person, and it was a sign of respect. If you chose not to wear a mask, it said that you were a bad person. If Curtis and I would have been speaking with each other, they'd had illustrations that showed that two people speaking to each other like this, with no mask on, that was bad and disrespectful. If you had the mask down your chin, it said that you had to do a better job. And if you had the mask down your nose, it said they were frowning upon that and said, you have to do better. But if you had the mask fully covering everything, then that meant that you were a good, decent person. So we saw that as this is obviously propaganda.
100%.
It is conditioning people to think like, oh, whoever's not wearing a mask, that person is bad, that person is a problem. So therefore, I think that would encourage people to attack individuals that would not even wear a mask.
That's right.
If you look at it from that perspective, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so I honestly can say I also did remove propaganda because it was everywhere. Like, people that were not in New York City do not understand how badly we had it here. It was really intense.
Yeah, no, it was really such a gnarly, assaulting time, and we were assaulted from every angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Since the minute we left our houses, the propaganda was everywhere in our buildings. We could not escape. Even if we wanted to, put it like, okay, let me forget about this. How could you? If even when you went on Facebook, the propaganda was there. When you went to YouTube, the propaganda was there.
Right.
Even in our emails, like there was just no way to really like sit back and think like, okay, nothing's happening in the world. I mean, technically nothing was really happening, but however, they needed to put the propaganda in order to make the masses scared so that they can continue accepting the removal of their God-given freedom. So,
it's all part of the divide and conquer strategy.
I agree.
It was the unmasked versus the masked, the vaccinated versus unvaccinated, because they've tried all the greatest hits and they realize that none of it works ultimately.
Right. I mean, eventually it did escalate with the vaccine mandates, but to talk about that, the propaganda, we had gone to Washington, D.C., where I was supposed to speak for Defeat the Mandates. We stopped because you wanted to eat at a kosher restaurant.
That's right.
When we were in there, you stated that you had a medical and religious exemption. However, one of the workers... Yes, to the mask.
Yeah.
One of the workers decided that she was going to give us the menu, so we thought, okay, everything's going to work out well. But then the other staff member that was behind the counter decided that she wanted us to go outside. Mind you, this was wintertime. It was super cold.
Yeah.
We were already inside the store. By the time we were already inside, we could have just ordered, right? I started to say something. You said something. The situation escalated. Nothing crazy, like nothing physical or anything like that. Just more like saying, like, remember what happened during slavery? The Holocaust was legal. Slavery was legal. This is inhumane. We're already inside. And one of the workers said, but you're infecting everyone or something like that, right? You remember that? It went viral, and I was even accused of Asian hate. It was pretty bad. Can you talk to us about that? Because typically in New York, a lot of the kosher restaurants, they were actually pretty open-minded and they were not discriminating. And it was very shocking to me to experience that.
Yeah, so for sure. No, and like you said, in New York City, it was one kosher restaurant in particular, whereas we went multiple times where we could actually seek refuge. They understood clearly what was happening. And as I said to you earlier before the interview, it seems to me that the people part of the country are very, how should I say, they're very committed. They're very subservient to the government. Many of them work government jobs. So they're very much in this matrix that the news is what is reality. We stopped for kosher food. I started filming. You had some words to share. And what can I say? The truth hurts. It went viral. The comments were just horrible. I was so upset, and obviously, as a member of the Jewish community, I was so embarrassed, but there are a lot of Jews out there who are not real. I wouldn't call them not real Jews, but they certainly aren't acting like appropriate Orthodox Jews. I mean, clearly we've seen the signs. I mean, when people compare this to the Holocaust, what has happened? I mean, people can watch Vera Sharav, who I had the opportunity to interview. Vera Sharav, who's a human rights activist and a Holocaust survivor. She's done a 5-part miniseries on children's health defense. Never Again is now global, talking about the parallels between what happened years prior to the Holocaust. And obviously we don't have, there are camps here. There are camps.
Quarantine camps
that are happening. It's not a conspiracy. A416, a bill, a horrible, diabolical bill drafted by Nick Perry, which on January 6th we took care of business. But certainly we are in that stage. And this is an uncomfortable truth. And we're not in a Holocaust now, God forbid. But with everything that has transpired in these last few years, with the segregation and the labeling of the disease and the sick, I mean, this is a page book right out of World War II propaganda.
Absolutely. And to add to that, what has happened now is the stages of genocide, right? No global takeover, right? No dictatorship starts right away to be, how can I say this? It starts in stages, right? Like the boiling frog effect, right? They're not going to start right away with the killing of the people. Right. It has to start where they have to dehumanize those that don't want to comply, in order to make the people that are complying with the government easier to control, in order to make them be the ones that are doing the government's job of discriminating against those that are not compliant, right? Because at this point, there's lower levels and there's higher levels to the government, right? But if you get the people that live in the same neighborhood to start discriminating against one another, to start hating one another, to start acting like the state police, then the government is doing a wonderful job. So then when they start to escalate and those people that don't want to comply continue to push and say, no, I'm not doing this, then it makes it easier for when the government decides, hey, I want to put you in a camp now, for us to get put into camps, and then people will watch because they have dehumanized us to the point of no return. So therefore, they no longer have any empathy or compassion to say, hey, stop, this is wrong.
Exactly.
So people should look into the 10 stages of genocide and understand that every dictatorship, it starts little by little. By the time people want to wake up, it's too late. Because the water gets so hot that the frog starts to adjust the body temperature to be able to be in sync with the water's temperature. It's too hot now, the frog cannot jump out. So people should be very careful, and that's something that people should study. I know it might sound extreme, right? But if you look back in history, you will see that there's correlations. It doesn't happen overnight, people. It starts little by little.
Exactly.
And also talking about that, do you recall the time that we were in the streets? Yeah, we were removing propaganda and putting like stickers. And someone called the cops on us and also called us terrorists.
Right.
Can you believe that?
I mean, at this point, unfortunately, I can pretty much believe anything. But when it's actually happening to you, we were just having a good time. We were just walking about in the city. And someone called the cops on us and called us domestic terrorists for moving propaganda. I mean, listen, some people love their slavery and they're very committed to it and they're very subservient. And you talk about it all the time, is that we have created a culture. The culture at large has become extremely docile, and that's through decades and decades worth of indoctrination.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think of the conditions of New York City? Like, do you think that there's any hope left for the people here at large in New York? The honest truth.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, listen, New York City for me, I mean, as your viewers may or may not know, I grew up on the West Coast and always dreamt of living in New York City. And I've been living here for 20 plus years, and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else but New York City. New York City was a place where supposedly anything could happen, and you felt a magic in this town. But to be frank, I just feel like it's so, for lack of a better word, it feels soulless. It really feels like it's lacking its charm, its character. Do I think that it has the ability to save itself? I mean, I'd like to think so. I don't know if I want to be part of that discovering process. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I mean, unless people wake up and there's a mass revolution. I mean, we've seen our elections. I mean, they're corrupted AF, right? I mean, there's no way in hell that Governor Hochul could have won the election. You just go on her Instagram page. No one likes her. You know, this unelected governor. There was so much great hope for Zeldin. We know that, these people are not elected. They're selected. So do I feel hope? I mean, I always feel hope. Where there's life, there's hope. So I always feel hopeful. But the realist in me is saying, if you value and love freedom, it might be a time to pack up and head elsewhere.
Talking about that, when the lockdown started, a lot of people actually left New York. And after they continued to put on more restrictions and fire people and the shutdowns of businesses, people are still living in New York. And honestly, I can't say that I blame them for going to Florida, Texas, South Carolina, where there seems freedom, I guess. But we shouldn't have to do that. But it's just, I don't know, New York feels kind of very negative and dark energy, and there's still propaganda outside in businesses, but it's unfortunate that it has to get to the point where you feel like, you know what, I'm not safe here anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just, it's horrible because New York had a different vibe. It was very lively. And yeah, it was very lively, but now it's just seems sad, and it's just so much crime in the streets, and nothing happens to criminals, but yet we were persecuted. We were treated as if we had killed people. Yeah.
I mean, thankfully everything's been absolved, but myself and you include, we have a rap sheet now.
We do.
We know we're honest, hardworking, God-fearing, God-loving human beings, and yet here we are, clown world, right?
Right, I agree. And the last final messages, what do you have to say to New York City and to anybody that might be watching this? What do you have to tell them about what happened?
Well, I would tell people is that there's always hope, as I said earlier. And, you know, God is more powerful than any of these evil entities. I do believe that. I think this is a time of great reflection. I always talk about this. This is one of my primary platforms, is that this period of time it's two-pronged. It's, you know, the work has to be done on a macro level, which we've done. You know, we've been out on the streets. We've educated people. I'm proud to say we built a movement here. We built the medical freedom movement of New York City, which really it bled out into the rest of the country and potentially even the globe. So I take great pride in that, and it's one of my greatest legacies. But that's very much on a macro level. I think a lot of this period of time is very much work on a micro level. It's that work on yourself, and I know that you're a big proponent of it as well, is shadow work, and you take shadow work very seriously.
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, no, it's not a joke. Yes. I don't want to divulge too much, but I know, this woman has notebooks. She has got stacks of notebooks. Mm-hmm. She takes it very seriously. It's like any other academic subject for her. You take it very seriously, mm-hmm. and kudos to you. And you talk about that in your platform. But much of what needs to happen is the micro as well. If we're going to be welcoming in this new era, if we're ushering in this new era, we've got to get right with God. And so much of that is, like I said, the macro, but it's very much the micro. We have to take personal responsibility. We can try to save the world, but if we can't save ourselves, then what's it worth for? We're a world unto ourselves. I would say never to lose hope. Never to lose hope. Where there's life, there's hope. And this too shall pass. These are hard times. These are lean times. But I do believe the best is yet to come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Curtis. And I appreciate everything that you said. And I hope that this is a teaching moment for people, because all of this happened and it seems like everything is back to normal. However, the impact of what has happened is going to continue to affect us as we move forward, right?
Yeah.
And in order for us to be able to move forward, we need to have a conversation, and we all need to heal. Otherwise, if we just pretend like nothing happened and just go on with our lives, then the same thing is going to happen again, because that means that we have not learned from our lessons. So thank you so much, Curtis, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.